Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today, I'm going to be covering this book, Sharp Teeth, by Toby Barlow. Let's see, the copyright information says this was printed in 2008. It's about 14 to 15 years old as of the time of recording this. I bought this book at Coaz Books in Las Cruces, New Mexico for $6. But what caught me about this book is that it's written entirely in free verse. So I'll give you a page to look at. If you've ever read a modern translation of the Odyssey or of those Greek plays, it's written in a similar style to that, where instead of having necessarily complete sentences, what happens, and there are complete sentences, the line starts and breaks at points of focus within the sentence. So turning to page 118 here, the line at the top of the page is, "Looks like our time is up." The next line, "Annie closes her eyes." Next line, "And sniffs at the night. She knows the cop." Next line, "Will come back. Sit in his car." Next line, "Wait for something." Next line, "Oh yeah, she thinks we'll give him something." And it reads like that. So every line builds to another line, but the line break happens at a point where it's supposed to separate to a kind of different thought. So this story is about werewolves in a modern day Los Angeles. This book is about those werewolves in LA, but it is also about that feeling of being down and out, of not knowing what you're supposed to do with your life, that feeling of loneliness and needing someone else to get through the day, the feeling of camaraderie with a group of people that aren't really healthy, all sorts of loneliness and that depression and that in that liminal time of your life in your 20s and 30s. And the book uses that old style alpha pack sense of wolf communities, which has been scientifically proven to be not really true. But in this book, those are equated with gangs. In a way, it's reminiscent of the 1970s movie, The Warriors. And what do I mean by that? I mean, in that story of The Warriors, each gang was separated. They were all trying to fight one specific gang. The one gang was like a pack of stray dogs trying to get back to their home turf and getting, seduced or getting, falling in little puppy love or getting caught by cops, all sorts of things on the way back to their home. And this, the organization of the packs feels similar to that. You have one or two major characters per pack. Usually it's the guy in charge who is trying to get up to some scheming, whether it's expanding his domain, whether it is making money, selling drugs, doing whatever. And in a lot of the packs, there's also a single female. So it'll be 6 or 7, maybe more men, young men, and one young woman. The guy in charge of each pack effectively uses that woman for the control of his pack. He lends her to the others in the pack to placate them, to make them feel like they get something occasionally. They get the scrap. Food works that way, money works that way, and the woman in the pack works that way. This book focuses primarily on two characters. One is a young man named Anthony, who is a dog catcher, ends up interacting with some of these wolves, these werewolves, and he ends up falling in love with maybe not love, but it's a very carnal passion the two have for each other. He falls for this girl that the narrative only calls She. The character, She, is a California native. She's going through that transitional period in her life and falls in with these werewolves. She ends up becoming one, and for a time, while the pack is split up, she lives with this dog catcher, and they enjoy some time together. I think it's a couple weeks, maybe a month and change, something like that. Eventually, the dog catcher's life starts falling apart. He ends up becoming a werewolf, and he's not in the same group of werewolves, the same pack as the character She. And eventually, one pack is trying to move drugs around the area, trying to make money through the drug trade. And another is, through a favor from the leader of their pack, sworn to defend a specific drug dealer. And it culminates in this battle. There's a sub-story about like a C plot where federal or city, I forget which, officers are investigating someone, and they end up trying to catch the drug supplier. And as they move in, the wolves end up in a giant werewolf fight where they're all in wolf form, and the officers see just a bunch of dogs being treated as, dog fighting effectively. Someone else is controlling these other dogs, and they're just being sent to kill each other. So the officers end up shooting the wolves. The main movers and players, the main characters within this narrative end up getting away from that fight, 4 or 5 of them, while all the rest of the less powerful or less charismatic characters, they end up dying. And it's, in a way, I don't like that aspect of the writing. It's just a way to wipe clean the slate, but it also allows room for the ending, which is that the main character, this Anthony, ends up chasing a wolf through the streets of Los Angeles, and eventually they end up stopping for water, and they drink water out of a oily, grimy puddle. One of them changes form into human, just giving up, and the other realizes it's the person they had that fling with, and they change shape again, together having that passionate romance again. It ends with those two effectively enjoying each other's company in both in the wolf form and in human form, but kind of giving up on humanity, the human side of themselves, to enjoy frolicking, and their whole days are spent as 2 dogs on the beaches of Santa Cruz. One of the other characters that survives the climax, that battle, is a character named Annie, who I want to say is almost like a D-plot character, and she ends up recruiting a bunch of werewolves to her pack. She ends up escaping many harrowing situations. She survives, she escapes, she's a runner. And in the end, she sees Anthony and character She, and their ending is tied together, where they're basically out of the scheming game, all 3 of them. They just want to be left to their own devices. And their own devices, of course, are just, they want to live without being bothered. That's kind of the good ending, so to speak, but it's not really a happy ending. It's like in the movie The Warriors, there's no climactic battle where the Warriors duke it out with the bad guy and, defeat the bad guys or send them packing. The Warriors, they run all the way back to their home turf, but it's not enough. It leaves the Warriors to live on, but they're diminished. Some of them have been arrested, some of them have been killed. Some of them have just given up and left. A much smaller group returns to Coney Island. And Sharp Teeth feels very similar to that. It's a fun book, but it's not a happy book. It's not a depressing book per se. It's just that stage of your life where so many things are changing. It captures that emotion, that feeling very well. The back matter also comes with its own little table of contents about the author, a questionnaire about the book, a conversation with Toby Barlow, and then the cast of characters. And then finally, a little Is Your Dog a Werewolf test and a playlist that the writer associated with writing this book. 2 of those parts seem very, how do I put it, clickbaity in a sense. Is your dog a werewolf test? Seem very clickbaity, which kind of fits because the back cover says Toby Barlow is executive creative director at the advertising agency JWT in Detroit and a contributor to N+1 and the Huffington Post. A finalist for the Shirley Jackson Award, Sharp Teeth is Barlow's first book. I think that kind of slipped in to the back matter kind of quietly. But the questionnaire includes, or the book Brahmin questionnaire says, the following questionnaire appeared first in Shelf Awareness, an email newsletter, and is reprinted with permission. And it just has a couple of questions about the author, really. Things like, favorite book when you were a child? And he responds, The Fool of the World and the Flying Ship. The heroes of the story are a bunch of loud, drunken louts who overthrow the Tsar. Someone should make a children's movie of it, he says. His top 5 authors are 5 I've literally never heard of. The kind of books he reads, I've just never heard of, either the authors or the books themselves. So the fact that I picked this up almost was partially the fact that the back matter includes that playlist. And the playlist page reads, Why write a novel in free verse? Good question, one I had to ask myself a lot. After all, this was my first novel, and I didn't know, frankly, if I was being savvy or perfectly nuts. But I would tell myself, we all grew up reading the lyrics off of the backs of old albums, trying to stitch together some sort of meaning out of the ragged lines there. So instead of writing proper poetry, I aimed to summon up some rambling dark adventure, less like Coleridge and more like Dylan's Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts, or Nick Cave's The Curse of Millhaven. Predictably, there was a lot of loud music playing while I wrote this. Not thrash metal so much as songs that evoked that space we share with the dogs in our lives. It turns out there are a lot of them. And so included in this playlist is Salty Dog by Cat Power, The Hungry Wolf by X, Rain Dogs by Tom Waits, Old News by Dr. Dog, Diamond Dogs by David Bowie, Raised by Wolves by Foxtrot, Werewolf by Cat Power. It's very specifically thematic, but that part of the book is what drew me in. So my experience with this book is not going to be yours, but I think if you're interested in that kind of shapeshifter story, that werewolf story, this book may not necessarily be for you, but it's kind of an oddball that it is for me. I'm glad I read this. Was it worth $6? Yeah, basically. I'm not sure I'll reread this more than once or twice. It's probably just going to collect dust on my shelf. But it was written in free verse, and that's what caught me. I liked it well enough. So, yeah, there's a lot that happens in this book that I didn't cover. Even if I kind of spoiled the ending, it doesn't at all remotely ruin the book for you, I don't think. And plus, I probably butchered some story elements. I reread these for the videos, but I kind of more skim it than reread it in depth. I'm not taking notes the whole time, so. Anyway, my name is Wild Stag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.